That's it.
Well, he's at 200 damage right now. Puts the
AZ
AZ down.
back to hand.
And Jason Klosinski is your 2015 U.S. National Champion.
I can't even believe it.
Unbelievable.
Wow. This man has paved the ultimate Pokemon Master storyline.
He's done it all.
You
Three-time world champion, national champion, regional champion, all the way. Every tournament, Jason Klosinski has won them all.
I feel like the only thing Jason haters ever had against him is they said, well, look, he's not really that good at nationals. He just wins those small events. He's now won one of the biggest events that we've ever had in the Pokemon trading card game, mowing down over 900 players to become just, I think, in general, the greatest Pokemon player of all time. The best resume.
I don't think you can dispute that at this point.
Since the beginning, Pokemon players have been conditioned to want to be the best, like no one ever was. But who gets to hold that title of the greatest Pokemon player of all time? The trading card game has long been Pokemon's largest and most competitive game, attracting millions of players every year to its competitions across the world and awarding millions of dollars in prizes to top finishers. The top honor in the Pokemon TCG is to earn the title of World Champion, and only one player has done that more than once. And that player has also done it a third time. Jason Klosinski. Jason Klosinski is the 2006, 2008, and 2013 World Champion. Jason pretty much became the undisputed Pokemon TCG GOAT when he won his third World Championship title in 2013. In 2015, he won the U.S. National Championships, further separating himself from anyone hoping to challenge his reign. Jason retired from competing after his Nats win in 2015, and his claim to the GOAT status went unchecked for a couple of years, until a player from Norway started racking up international championship wins at a dizzying rate.
Tord Reklev is your European International Champion, 5-time international champion, and the greatest player of the modern era.
Tord Reklev, congratulations. You are the Masters TCG champion.
Of the 23 international championships that have been held since the 2016-2017 season, Tord has won 5 of them. And despite not having a Worlds title under his belt, he did get top 4 in 2019 and reached the finals in 2023. This is an incredible time in the Pokemon TCG. History is being made right now. With Tord's 5th international championship win, lots of players have strong opinions on the subject of the Pokemon TCG GOAT, myself included. I was interested to see what some other players thought, so at this year's North American International Championship, I started asking around. Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
I think it's Tord Reklev.
Jason Klosinski, no doubt about it.
Tord Reklev.
Jason Klosinski.
I'm going with Tord. I think Jason K is undeniably the second best player.
Y yo juego hace mucho tiempo, así que soy de la vieja escuela, así que yo voto por Jason Klosinski.
This has been a question for a long time, and I've had pretty strong opinions on it in the past that have changed drastically over the last few years. So I used to be a pretty big Tord opponent, but I think it has to be Tord at this point.
My GOAT might be Andrew Mahone.
Jason Klosinski, obviously. No one will ever do what he did, and I don't care how many ICs Tord won. So that's where I'm at.
It's got to be Jason Klosinski. I know that championships aren't everything. Winning a championship, a world championship, like decades apart, having 3, I think in my mind he's the GOAT.
Grant Manley, who is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time?
It's definitely me.
You know, you have to consider a lot of things. You got to consider like results, but also like the influence you have like on the game. Tord has just innovated more. It's not to say Jason definitely could be doing well, but I feel like Tord has just made so many broken decks that people haven't seen before. And I don't know, I got to give it to Tord.
From my perspective, I think it's Tord.
Winning all 4 ICs, I'm pretty sure he's won 5, gone second at some, You know, he has 2 Pikachu trophies a second, and he got top 4, I think. Multiple regional wins. I grew up in his era. I played against him a few times. He's just a really talented player, so I gotta say Tord.
I'm going to tell you that Tord is the best player of all time.
Man, it's so tough. I think it's got to be Tord, though. Jason's got the Worlds wins, but Tord has the consistency. All these ICs are massive that he's won. Tord's had great finishes at Worlds. He obviously hasn't won, but it's coming. It's coming. I've got the script.
It's Tord. It's Tord. I mean, Jason's obviously very good, but until he comes back, it's Tord.
I'm currently a little bit up on the air on it. I initially used to say Jason, 3-time world champion. More recently, I've said Tord. But the question that I think needs to be answered and that I haven't quite figured out is, does the greatest player of all time need to have won the world championships? And I'm actually not sure. And I think it's the question that needs to be answered. And then once you answer that, I think it's pretty obvious. If it's no, it's Tord. If it's yes, then it is still Jason.
Where do you put yourself on this list?
I don't really think about it too much. I'm not close to Jason or Tord, so it doesn't really matter until, you know, I'd have to have like one win Worlds this year or next year, and then maybe there's like a consideration to it, but like I'm not really thinking about it too much. When I win Worlds once, maybe I'll put some more thought into it.
I do think it's kind of funny that Azul said he wasn't sure if you had to win Worlds in order to be the Pokemon TCG GOAT, but then said in order for himself to be considered a 2-time international championship winner and a 7-time regional champion, he would have to win Worlds. I just find that interesting. I think it's interesting is all. I ended up getting some great input from players at NAIC, but I did notice that there was a little bit of a pattern. Younger, more modern players tended to vote for Tord as the GOAT, which makes sense because they had gotten to see Tord's dominance firsthand, while more veteran players that had played during Jason's prime, they tended to vote for Jason. I do think that there's some recency bias going on with the discussion, so I sat down with longtime Pokemon TCG players Michael Pramawa and Chris Fulop to get their takes.
For me, the greatest TCG player of all time is Jason Klasinski. Now, I've had the privilege of be able to play against both Tord and Jason, and, you know, in terms of gameplay-wise, it's like, once you're at that level, there's not much room for variance in terms of, like, how people play. So it's really about, like, accolades at that point. And for me to be the best, in order to be considered the best, you have to at least win Worlds once. If Tord wins Worlds at some point, you know, sure. But right now, like, you can't be the best player of all time without winning the World Championship. That's just how it is for me.
Jason is the best tactical player I've ever seen. Obviously, the big debate, especially after Tord just won an unprecedented 5th IC, after he won an unprecedented 4th IC, after he won an unprecedented 3rd IC, is really, how does this start to stack up against Jason's 3 Worlds wins? Not only does Jason have his 3 Worlds wins, but I want to point out a couple of his other big accomplishments. He won Nationals in 2015. In 2003, he won the Fan Appreciation Tournament. That was the biggest event of that year. He won the Tropical Mega Battle. Then you have Super Trainer Showdowns, which are the biggest tournaments. So you have to look beyond just those 3 Worlds wins to what was he doing at the highest level for the 4 years prior to that. And the game was entirely different. It's just a different style of Pokemon. So that it really is why I put a lot of weight behind navigating. Like, if you play modern Pokemon and then go back and play old Wizards of the Coast era stuff like base set or up through like Neo or whatever, it's like, it's not the same game. It's a completely different game. I'm not saying one's easier than the other, but it's different. I know Jason's excelled at both. I assume Tord would as well. But that's still, there is that discrepancy there. I do believe that Jason Klasinski is the greatest Pokemon player of all time. Is that going to stand? I mean, Tord is certainly breathing down his neck. Anyone who doesn't believe that it's close is selling one player or the other short.
Comparing Tord and Jason's tournament finishes would be a lot easier if they had played during the same period of time for longer, but unfortunately, that's not the case. There's only a few years of overlap where both Tord and Jason were competing against each other for the title of World Champion, between the years 2012 and 2015. Both players finished in the top 32 of the 2012 World Championships. Then Jason went on to win the 2013 World Championships and finished in the top 32 of the 2015 World Championships before retiring. These few World Championships are the only tournaments where both Tord and Jason competed against each other for a major title. Before bowing out of competitive play, Jason won the U.S. National Championships in 2015, which was the largest Western tournament ever held at the time, featuring over 900 players. The International Championship circuit didn't begin until 2017, so Jason never got to play in an international championship. But those late U.S. National Championships were definitely comparable to the early international championships in size and prestige. Tord's absolute dominance of international championships cannot be overstated. He's won 5 of them, got second at 2, top 4 at another, and then top 8'd 3 more. That's 11 top 8 finishes or better out of the 23 international championships that have been held so far. In addition to his unmatched international championship success, Tord is also a multiple-time regional champion and 4-time Norway national champion. Before the introduction of the international championship circuit in 2017, each country with organized play hosted its own national championship. Norway's national championships weren't nearly as large as the U.S. national championships. They averaged about 100 players a year, but still, winning 4 national titles over the course of a handful of years is incredibly impressive. Tord also finished in the top 4 of the European Challenge Cup in 2012 and 2014, which were the largest tournaments held in Europe during those years. These results show that over the last 10 years, Tord has gone from being one of the best players in Europe to the best player playing the game right now. One of the biggest arguments for Jason's GOAT status, as Chris pointed out, is that he was at the top of the game while the game evolved from its infancy all the way up to the modern era. Jason won multiple major titles during the early Wizards of the Coast days before the first World Championship was ever held, asserting himself as a top player during that pre-World Championship time. In 2006, Jason became the first player to win a World Championship title with a Trainer Lock deck, defeating Jimmy Ballard's Evolutions deck in the finals. Many players consider 2006 to be the most skill-intensive format in the history of the Pokémon TCG. In 2008, Jason became the first player to ever win a second World Championship title with Gardy Gallade, a deck that many players considered to be the best deck in the format. So Jason took a BDIF and just played it better than everybody else.
This year is the first time ever that we have had a second-time champion from the United States, the Masters champion, Jason.
Over 15 years later, Jason is still the only player to have ever won a second World Championship title in the Pokémon TCG. And then in 2013, Jason rewrote the history books again, becoming the first player to win a third World Championship title. And he did it in a totally unprecedented way. Jason didn't have his World Championship invite going into the 2013 World Championships, so he had to participate in the Last Chance Qualifier tournament the day before the World Championships. In order to gain an invite through the Last Chance Qualifier, you had to go undefeated. This event was so difficult that players often referred to it as the grinder. So Jason grinded in the day before Worlds, earned his invite by going undefeated in the Last Chance Qualifier, and then won the 2013 World Championships. And Jason is the only player to ever accomplish such a feat. If you haven't figured it out yet, I think that Jason Klaczynski is the greatest Pokemon TCG player of all time. He's the only Pokemon player who has 2 Worlds titles, and he has a 3rd Worlds title. Even though Tord's resume is incredibly impressive, saying that Tord is the GOAT has a pretty severe Western bias because there's a whole player base from the Asia region that doesn't really participate in international championships. And they have their own tournament structure with their own invite system. The only event every year that brings all of the best players from around the world to one competition is the World Championships. And the World Championship is the event that players travel to duke it out and decide who the best player in the world is. It's by far the most difficult tournament to win and the most exclusive title in the game. And Jason's won it 3 times. There are 3 different players that have won 2 or more international championships, and Stefan Ivanhoff nearly won a 3rd this past NAIC. And international championships have only been held since 2017. The World Championships have been held every year since 2004, and there's only one player that has dominated them like Jason Klaczynski. And that's why I think he's the greatest Pokemon player of all time. But don't just take my word for it. Let's see what Tord has to say. Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon player of all time?
The greatest Pokemon player of all time have always been Jason Klaczynski, in my opinion. He was the one I grew up watching. I was always admiring just how he played, how he figured out, new decks and everything. He was basically my role model, idol when I was growing up and trying to improve and get better at the game itself. I felt like every time I watched one of his games, he would do something, small, like a little detail, right? Where, for example, he had a supporter in hand, but he chose not to play it. And I remember, many years ago, I was like, wow, that's genius. You didn't play the N yet? That must be, a good reason for that, right? And it surely was that I figured out many years later. Like the timing of everything was so important. And he won 3 World Championships as well. I'm trying to, get to a point where I can rival him, but it's very difficult. As many have pointed out, there's been 2 very different eras as well. It's difficult to compare. You would have to sort of have some arbitrary metric for what is, more difficult or not, right? Like the old World Championships that are smaller but have, more, elite players at them compared to, a 2,000-3,000 people international championship that have, half of them playing their first event for the first time. It really depends how you want to measure, but I feel like we both have done things that are going to be very difficult to replicate in the future for like any player. You would need a crazy amount of dedication at least.
That's a pretty strong ending right there. It's about as good as it gets. But there is one more person that I want to ask. Who do you think is the greatest Pokemon player of all time?
Puka. Kyle Pukasukovic. Best player ever. Like, people are lucky he works for TPCI. Like, honestly, they're honestly lucky. His reign was always nationals, even though he didn't, I guess, have the best Worlds resume. If you have a better Nationals resume than Worlds, I think you're a lot better. It's harder to do that than it is in Worlds, if you will. You have to win way more.
Thank you so much for watching the video, and huge thank you to everybody who participated and made it a success. Make sure to like the video, sub to the channel, and let me know in the comments below who you think the greatest Pokemon player of all time is. Y'all take it easy and have a good one. See ya!